Welcome, dear brave listener. You're tuning in to Careful TV, and I'm truly grateful you're here. Whether you're tuning in during the day or late at night, thank you for choosing to spend a part of your time with me. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and means more than you know. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, what brought you here, or even what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Your support keeps this channel going, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, let's get into today's horror story. I never thought I'd be the type of person to get rattled inside a Dollar Tree of all places, but this memory has stuck with me for years. Sometimes it sneaks up on me when I'm standing in a checkout line, or when I walk through a brightly lit aisle that smells faintly of cleaning supplies and cheap plastic. You'd think that being in such a mundane, ordinary place would make you feel safe, almost invisible. But it only takes one person, one encounter, to remind you that vulnerability doesn't care about where you are. My name's Lauren, and at the time this happened I was 31, though I've always looked younger than I really am. All my life, people have assumed I'm 10 years younger than my actual age. It used to feel like a compliment when I was in my teens and 20s. Who doesn't want to hear that they look youthful? But the older I got, the more I realized it wasn't always something to be grateful for. Being mistaken for someone much younger meant people didn't take me seriously, and sometimes it gave them the wrong kind of confidence around me. I've lost count of the number of times I was talked down to, dismissed, or even worse, hit on by men who believed I was more naive or easier to manipulate than I really was. That background is important because it shaped how I read the situation that day. It was a Saturday in late spring. My boyfriend and I had stopped into a Dollar Tree in Dayton, Ohio. Nothing special, just one of those errands he'd do on autopilot. He liked to wander through the aisles at his own pace, scanning shelves for things he didn't need but wanted to check out anyway. Tools, batteries, kitchen gadgets. He always found something to marvel at. Me, I wanted to be in and out as quickly as possible. I grabbed a basket, told him I'd get the things we actually came for, and headed off down the cleaning aisle. The store was quiet. It was the middle of the afternoon, the kind of time when most people are running their bigger errands at grocery stores or big box retailers. The Dollar Tree had maybe 5 or 6 other shoppers scattered around. The overhead lights hummed faintly, reflecting off the white tile floor, and the air smelled faintly of artificial lemon. That's when I noticed him. He stood near the end of an aisle, just at the edge of the seasonal section where they had fake flowers, summer toys, and graduation balloons. He didn't look like the kind of person who belonged there. Most Dollar Tree shoppers wore jeans, hoodies, maybe a t-shirt and sandals. This man was dressed in a tailored gray suit, the kind that looked pressed and expensive despite the cheap surroundings. He had a polished cane with a curved handle, shiny black shoes, and a fedora with a feather tucked neatly into the side. His appearance was so carefully put together, it almost looked theatrical, like he was playing character from another time. I kept moving, not thinking much of it until he stepped forward and smiled directly at me. His face was lined with age, probably late 60s, maybe early 70s. His eyes were bright, but there was something behind them I couldn't quite place. Then he did something strange. He lifted his arm, bent at the elbow, and held it out toward me, as if expecting me to take it. "Come along," he said, his voice low but firm. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see a granddaughter or wife nearby who he was addressing. But the aisle was empty. It was just me. I laughed a little under my breath, trying to brush it off. "Sorry, do I know you?" I asked, polite but cautious. He just smiled wider. Instead of backing off, he started talking about the weather, how warm it had gotten lately, how the seasons never felt the same anymore. His tone was casual, like we'd already been having a conversation, and this was just a continuation of it. I nodded along, half listening, thinking maybe he was just lonely and looking for someone to chat with. But then he lifted his arm again, the same motion, almost insistent. "Come along," he repeated. The air shifted for me in that moment. My stomach tightened, and I felt a ripple of unease move through me. Something about the way he said it, the way his eyes stayed fixed on mine, didn't feel like confusion anymore. It felt intentional. "I think you got me confused with somebody else," I said, stepping back slightly, keeping my voice light. "Are you waiting for your wife? Or family?" He didn't answer my question. Instead, he adjusted his hat slightly, chuckled, and steered the conversation somewhere else. He asked if I worked nearby. His tone was soft, almost teasing, but his eyes didn't match the smile. They lingered on me too long, sharp and calculating in a way that made me want to look away. I answered honestly, more out of reflex than anything. "Not right now," I said. "I'm taking some time off." That's when he leaned in, too close. His body edged into my space until I could smell a faint trace of cologne, mixed with something musty, like mothballs. His face hovered close enough that I could feel the heat of his breath. "I've got plenty of work in my house," he whispered. "I'm sure I can find something for you." Then he tipped me a wink. Every muscle on my body went stiff. My skin prickled. My pulse thudded against my ears. In an instant, I understood this wasn't confusion, wasn't a quirky old man mistake. This was deliberate. He was trying to lure me, to test the boundaries of how far he could push in the middle of a brightly lit store. I forced a laugh, though it came out thin and shaky. "Oh, I'm all set," I said quickly. "My husband takes care of me." I don't usually refer to my boyfriend that way. The word husband felt heavy, protective, like it carried more weight. In that moment, it was the only shield I had. And then, almost miraculously, my boyfriend appeared. He turned the corner at the end of the aisle, holding a basket filled with batteries and snacks. His presence felt like oxygen rushing back into the room. The man's expression shifted instantly. Gone was the warm, smiling act. His eyes hardened, his jaw tightened, and for a split second, he looked almost furious. Then, just as quickly, his face flickered with something else. Fear, maybe, or shame at being caught. Without a word, he turned, and he disappeared. I don't mean he strolled casually down another aisle. I mean he moved so fast, so abruptly, that I lost track of him completely. One moment he was there, standing too close, and the next he was gone. I glanced around corners, expecting to see him near the front of the store or heading toward the checkout. But there was nothing. No trace of him in the aisles. No figure slipping out the automatic doors. It was like he had vanished in a thin air, and that unsettled me even more than the encounter itself. I stood frozen for a moment, gripping the handle of my basket so tightly my knuckles ached. My boyfriend looked at me, confused, and I tried to explain in fragments. An old man, the suit, the wink, the offer of work. His face shifted from confusion to concern, then to anger. He wanted to search the store, maybe confront the guy, but by then it was too late. He was gone. If it had been a harmless misunderstanding, I think I could have let it go. Maybe even laughed about it later. But the wink, that deliberate little signal, and the sudden, chilling shift in his expression told me otherwise. He wasn't confused. He wasn't some well-meaning old man who thought I was his daughter or niece. He knew exactly what he was doing, and the thought of what he might have tried if I had been alone, if my boyfriend hadn't shown up at that exact moment, still makes my stomach twist. I've been hit on by men who were too old before. I've brushed it off, even laughed it away. But this wasn't the same. This wasn't flirty or awkward. This was calculated, predatory, the kind of thing that makes you second-guess your own instincts afterward. For weeks after, I couldn't step into a store without scanning the aisles first. I kept replaying it in my head, wondering what work he had meant, what he had hoped I would say. I wondered how many times he had tried that routine before, and if anyone had ever followed him. I'll never know. All I do know is that to this day, every time I set foot in a Dollar Tree, I feel that same faint shiver crawl down my spine. Because he wasn't confused. It was an act, and he had chosen me. I don't usually think twice about running errands close to home, especially when it's something as simple as a quick trip to the Dollar Tree. It's the kind of place you go when you need to grab a few things on the fly: foil pans, dish soap, maybe a snack for the road. It's not somewhere you expect to feel unsafe. But this one day reminded me that danger doesn't always announce itself in dark alleys or abandoned parking lots. Sometimes it finds you in the most ordinary of places. My name's Rachel, and this happened just a couple years ago. The Dollar Tree I'm talking about sits on the edge of my neighborhood in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's within walking distance of my apartment, less than a block away, which is why I go there so often. I can slip on a hoodie, grab my wallet, and be back home in 15 minutes. That's exactly what I expected on this afternoon. A quick errand, in and out. It was a little after 5. The store wasn't busy, just a few people scattered in the aisles. I grabbed a couple of things I needed: a roll of paper towels, some freezer bags, and shampoo, and headed toward the checkout. That's when I noticed the 2 men already in line at the register. They stood out immediately. One of them looked to be in his 60s, shorter, gray hair, dressed plainly in a work jacket and jeans. He had the kind of build that softens with age, a little rounded at the waist, shoulders sloped. The other one was different, bigger, younger, maybe mid-40s, broad chest, thick arms, and a shaved head that caught the fluorescent light above him. He looked like someone who worked construction or security, solid, unmovable, like if you wanted to block your way, there wouldn't be much you could do about it. Their cart was full of cleaning supplies. I mean full. I glanced it out of boredom at first, but the contents caught my attention. 4 gallons of bleach stacked together, bottles of ammonia, sponges, gloves, trash bags, and a jumble of other items. My brain immediately jumped to the obvious joke, the kind people toss out without thinking. I leaned slightly forward and said, half under my breath, but loud enough for them to hear, "Damn, what did y'all kill?" The younger one, the one built like a brick wall, turned around slowly. His eyes locked on mine. They were flat, unreadable, the kind of stare that doesn't blink right away. "What?" he asked. That one word carried weight. Not curiosity, not confusion, something else. A warning, maybe. Most people with a shred of common sense would have backed down right there. I should have. But I have a bad habit of doubling down when I'm nervous, when silence feels more uncomfortable than filling the air. So I repeated myself, trying to play it off like it was nothing. I said, "What did y'all kill with all that bleach?" For a second, nothing. Then the corner of his mouth curved into a smirk. Not a friendly smirk, not amused. It was something darker, like he was in on a joke I didn't understand. He didn't say another word. He just stared at me for a few beats too long, then turned back around. The older man didn't even glance my way. He finished paying for their items while the younger one stood there, arms folded, shoulders square like a wall between me and the register. I felt the seconds drag. The cashier bagged their items, handed them the receipt, and they walked out together without another look. I paid for my things quickly, trying to shake it off. I told myself it was nothing, that I made a dumb joke to the wrong guy. But when I stepped outside, the air felt heavier. They were waiting, not standing right by the door, but close enough to notice. Their truck was parked a few spaces away, an old black Chevy with dents along the side. The 2 of them weren't inside it yet. They were standing next to it, facing the entrance, and they were looking straight at me. I froze for half a second, the weight of their stares pinning me in place. Then I forced myself to keep walking, telling myself not to react, not to make it obvious that my chest was tightening with every step. As I passed their truck, I caught something that made my stomach flip. They were pointing at me. The older man gestured with his chin, and the younger one leaned slightly toward him, lips moving, expression serious. They weren't laughing, they weren't brushing me off. They were discussing me. I walked faster. The plastic Dollar Tree bag crinkled in my hand, absurdly loud against the muted sounds of the parking lot. I didn't look directly at them again. but I could feel their attention sticking to me like static. Just as I reached the edge of the lot, I heard the rumble of their truck engine starting. Panic flared in my chest. I didn't want to lead them back to my apartment. I was only a block away, but the idea of them knowing exactly where I lived made my skin crawl. I turned in the opposite direction instead, down a side street that would loop around the neighborhood. The sound of the truck idling behind me made every hair on the back of my neck stand up. My brain kept cycling through questions I couldn't answer. Were they just messing with me? Did they actually care about what I'd said? Or was this about something else entirely? Why so much bleach? Why so many cleaning supplies? I forced myself not to look back right away. I kept my stride steady, not running, not drawing attention. When I finally risked a glance over my shoulder, the truck was pulling out of the lot. My heart dropped, but instead of turning down the side street after me, they drove straight past. The younger one was behind the wheel, and as the truck rolled by, his eyes flicked toward me. That same smirk stretched across his face again, just for a second, before he pressed the gas and the truck disappeared down the road. I stood there for a long moment, clutching my bag like it could shield me, until the sound of the engine faded completely. My body trembled with the delayed flood of adrenaline. I took the long way home, looping through 3 extra blocks before finally slipping into my apartment building. Even now, I can't tell myself it was harmless. The way they watched me, the way they pointed and talked, the deliberate silence. None of it felt like a misunderstanding. It felt calculated. I think about that cart full of bleach sometimes, how ordinary items can look sinister when they're piled together. I think about the smirk that man gave me, how it seemed to say more than words ever could. And most of all, I think about how quickly a simple trip to Dollar Tree can turn into a memory that follows you long after the fluorescent lights fade. On August 14th, 2002, Officer Daniel Ricks used a spare key provided by the district manager to open the rear door of the Dollar Tree on East Colfax Avenue in Aurora, Colorado. Inside, he found the bodies of 2 employees, Laura Martinez and David Turner. Both had been attacked with brutal force, and the store safe was open and emptied. It was supposed to be an ordinary closing shift, but instead it marked the beginning of a case that, even after decades, remains unsolved. I'm Brian, and this case has always stuck with me because of how ordinary the setting was. A chain discount store, late night closing, nothing that would have seemed unusual to the people working there. Laura was 34, a mother of 2 young kids, and David was just 26, newly married. They weren't people who had enemies or dangerous pasts. They were employees doing their jobs in a store that thousands of people shopped at every week. Yet they ended up as victims of one of the most senseless crimes in Aurora's history. What we know is frustratingly thin. The Dollar Tree closed the customers at 10 p.m. that night, and by midnight neither Laura nor David had come home. Their families tried calling both their cell phones, but neither answered. Imagine that moment. The endless ringing, the way silence stretches in your chest when you're waiting for someone you know should have picked up. By 3 a.m., worried relatives had contacted the police, reporting them missing. When Officer Ricks arrived to check the store a little after 4 o'clock, he discovered what everyone had been dreading. The back entrance appeared to have been used. Both victims were found near the rear of the store, and the safe was empty. It wasn't just the loss of money that unsettled investigators, but the level of violence. Robbery, on its own, rarely looks this personal. The question investigators kept circling back to was, why would Laura or David unlock that door? Dollar Tree employees were trained never to open after hours. The only scenario that made sense was that they either knew the person or they were forced. Detectives interviewed dozens of people connected to them. Family, friends, former co-workers. Everyone was looked at closely. No one seemed to have any motive. Laura's family described her as gentle, always willing to help others, someone who stayed out of conflict. David's young wife said the same. He was friendly, easygoing, someone people liked right away. Neither had histories that suggested the kind of enemies who would do something like this. Both were the kind of people you could imagine being patient with rude customers, or staying late to help a coworker finish stocking. One detail has always stood out to me. A white box truck was found abandoned 2 blocks away in the early morning hours, traced back to a rental company in Denver. It had been stolen the same day as the murders. Was it coincidence, or part of the plan? Detectives wondered if the truck had been meant as a getaway vehicle, or even a place to stash stolen goods. But it made little sense. Why would someone risk everything for a store safe, when Dollar Tree wasn't exactly known for holding much cash at closing time? On a good night, maybe a few $1,000s, hardly worth the kind of risk that ends with 2 lives taken. Witnesses came forward with small fragments. A couple walking their dog near the strip mall reported seeing a man sprinting across the parking lot around 10:45 p.m. They described him as tall, wearing a dark hoodie, but in the haze of night and distance, no one could say more. Another witness mentioned hearing a vehicle with a loud exhaust leaving the area quickly, the kind of sound that cuts through the stillness of the night and lingers in your memory. These were leads that never developed into anything concrete. The brutality of it all is what makes people question whether this was just a robbery. If it were only about money, why kill both employees so violently? Why not threaten them, take the cash and leave? It raised speculation that the killer might have been someone familiar, possibly even a former employee, someone who knew the routines and the layout. Maybe they recognized the victims, and things escalated. Or maybe the violence was always part of the plan. That's what makes it hard to sit with. Knowing the line between a robbery gone wrong and a targeted attack blurs until you can't tell one from the other. Laura's mother later said something that has haunted me since I first read it in the paper. She would not have opened that door unless she trusted the person. That idea, that trust was what allowed the killer inside, changes how you see the whole crime. It suggests betrayal, that they weren't just unlucky workers caught in a random act, but people deliberately targeted by someone who used familiarity to get close. That one line reframes everything, and it makes the tragedy cut deeper. The community reacted with shock and grief. Dollar Tree stores across the Denver metro area added extra security for closing shifts, sometimes even requiring police patrols to pass by at night. But the sense of safety in that everyday routine, shopping for cheap household goods, seeing clerks bag items, children running to pick out candy, was shattered. Suddenly, people were reminded that violence could enter even the most ordinary places. Parents who used to stop by on their way home from work started double-checking the locks on their cars before going in. Employees walked to their vehicles in groups, keys gripped between their fingers. Fear rippled through every corner of something that used to feel harmless. Over the years, detectives followed every faint lead. At one point, they pursued a suspect tied to a string of armed robberies across Colorado. Another time, they considered whether a transient known to camp near East Colfax could have been involved. But nothing solid ever stuck. Even a reward of $25,000 failed to bring forward new information. The case became one of those shadows in the background of local news, a reminder of something unsolved but rarely spoken about. Time passed, witnesses moved, memories faded. By the mid-2010s, the case was nearly forgotten outside of the families who still lived with the absence. When I think about this story, what unsettles me most isn't just the violence, it's the silence that followed. No confession, no witness who finally spoke up, no DNA breakthrough that cracked the case. Just a void where answers should have been. Families were left not only with grief, but with questions that would never be resolved. How do you explain to children that the people who killed their parents simply vanished into the night, never to be caught? That kind of unresolved ending eats away at people. It shapes how they move through the world, makes them wary of strangers, even wary of trust itself. I've often wondered if the killer thought about it afterward. If they passed by another Dollar Tree someday and remembered what they'd done, if they felt guilt or fear of being caught, or if they carried on as though nothing had happened, the not knowing is its own kind of torment. It leaves you stuck imagining both extremes. Either a guilty conscience weighing someone down for years, or a complete lack of remorse, a person walking freely without ever looking back. What lingers are the questions. Was a stranger desperate for quick money who panicked and turned violent? Was it someone the employees recognized and trusted enough to open that back door? Did the stolen truck have anything to do with it? Or was it just noise in the timeline of a city that sees more than its share of crime? Every theory feels incomplete. Every explanation leaves something hanging in the air, unresolved. We may never know. But the absence of resolution doesn't erase the fact that two people, Laura and David, lost their lives in a place that should have been safe. A closing shift at a Dollar Tree should never have ended that way. And yet it did. The details remain frozen in time, unchanged while everything else in the world kept moving. The shelves have been restocked countless times. Other employees have come and gone. Customers have carried bags of cheap goods out to their cars. But for the families, the night of August 14th never ended. That's what makes this story hard to let go of. Not the headlines, which faded quickly, or the case files that gathered dust, but the reminder that even in the most ordinary corners of America, violence can break through without warning. For the families, the lack of closure is its own punishment. For the rest of us, it's a story that stays in the back of your mind whenever you walk into a store late at night, noticing the unlocked doors, the quiet aisles, and the people who might, or might not, be safe to trust. I was pretty young when this happened, maybe 8 or 9. It was one of those quiet Saturday afternoons where my mom would take me into town to run errands, and she always let me tag along. Saturdays felt different back then. There wasn't any rush like weekdays, no alarm clocks or bus rides or school schedules. Just this kind of steady rhythm to the day where everything felt slower, softer. Mom would usually plan a handful of stops, maybe the grocery store, sometimes the pharmacy, and often a swing through Dollar Tree because she knew how much I loved wandering around in there. For me, the Dollar Tree was like stepping into my own little world. Even though it was just rows of cheap knickknacks, plastic toys, and candy, when you're a kid with $10 or $15 in your pocket, that place feels like treasure. You can stretch a single bill farther there than anywhere else, and I like that feeling, like I had real freedom. Like I could make decisions on my own. I'd walk in with my allowance and feel rich, like I could walk out with a bag full of stuff that was entirely mine. My name's Evan, and what I still remember most clearly is how quickly one ordinary day turned into something I've never been able to shake. It started as routine, the kind of afternoon you don't think twice about. Mom and I were parked outside the strip mall. She leaned over before getting out of the car and told me she needed to duck into the grocery store across the street for a few things. She asked if I wanted to wait with her or stay in the Dollar Tree while she shopped. The choice was obvious to me. I said yes immediately, probably a little too eagerly. Being inside Dollar Tree on my own felt like this small slice of independence. Mom trusted me enough to let me browse while she took care of groceries. And even though she said she wouldn't be long, I like having that window of time to just wander by myself. She gave me the usual reminder, stay inside, don't go anywhere else, I'll be right back. And I nodded, confident. I can still see the way the store looked when I walked in. The lights overhead hummed faintly, casting everything in that sterile glow that all discount stores seem to share. The air smelled like floor cleaner, mixed with the faint plastic scent of packaging that never quite goes away. The place was quiet, the kind of late afternoon lull when only a few people are shopping. A mother with a stroller in the front, a man near the refrigerated section in the back, and one older woman sorting through gift bags in the middle. Not crowded, not empty, just quiet. I drifted toward the back of the store where the shelves held little trinkets and figurines. The kind of generic decor pieces that look identical no matter what town you're in. Little angels, glass vases, cheap candles, miniature statues. I picked one up, a small angel figurine with poorly painted gold wings, and turned it over in my hands. I wasn't sure if it was worth $1, but in that moment it was just something to focus on. That's when I noticed him. He walked into the aisle slowly, his shoes making this soft, scuffing sound against the tile floor. At first glance, he didn't look like anyone I recognized. His hair was long, falling past his shoulders, streaked with gray and uneven strands. His beard was messy, not full but patchy, like it hadn't been trimmed in weeks. His clothes stood out too. Faded jeans, an oversized flannel shirt, and a necklace made of wooden beads that looked out of place in a store like this. He didn't look threatening, not in the way that makes you immediately back away. If anything, he seemed calm, detached, like he was just moving through the store at his own pace. But there was something about him that made me freeze anyway. I didn't know if I should leave the aisle or stay put. My mom had always warned me about strangers, told me not to talk to anyone I didn't know, not to linger near people who gave me a bad feeling. And while he didn't rush toward me or get too close, the way he drifted in my direction made me hesitate. I kept my eyes on the figurine in my hands, pretending to steady it, my pulse already speeding up. That nervous flutter sat heavy in my chest, the kind you feel when you know someone's watching you. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him stop a few feet away. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then his voice came, quiet but clear. "You like to draw, don't you?" The words hit me so hard I nearly dropped the figurine. My head snapped up, and I stared at him, wide-eyed. I hadn't told anyone in that store about drawing. I hadn't even mentioned it out loud. The only people who really knew how much I liked to draw were my parents. Drawing was private for me. I'd spend hours at home sketching in spiral notebooks, doodling on scrap paper, making little chalk drawings on the sidewalk outside. It wasn't something I ever shared with strangers. I didn't answer him. My throat tightened, and it felt like if I spoke, I'd give something away. He kept watching me, his face unreadable. Then he added, softly, "Keep making things. You got a gift. Don't waste it." The words lodged themselves in me. How could he know that? It wasn't just a random guess. The way he said it, so specific, so direct, cut into something I hadn't told anyone else in this building. I glanced around the aisle, hoping someone else might have overheard, but it was just us. The buzz of the fluorescent lights seemed louder, filling the silence between us. My palms were sweaty against the figurine, and the cheap paint felt slick under my fingers. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. He held it out toward me, nodding at the shelf. "Go ahead," he said. "Pick one you like. This one's on me." Every instinct I'd scream not to take it. My mom's warnings about strangers replayed in my head. Don't take things from people you don't know. Don't let anyone buy you things. But the way he was watching me, calm, patient, but intent, made it impossible to move. I shook my head quickly, mumbling, "No, I'm fine," and set the figurine back on the shelf. For a second, he just stood there, the bill still in his hand. His eyes narrowed slightly. Not angry, not threatening, but something else. Something heavier. It wasn't disappointment like when a teacher sighs at you, or when a parent frowns. It was deeper than that. Like he expected me to understand something I didn't. Then he shrugged, slipped the money back in his pocket, and gave me the faintest smile. "You'll understand later," he said softly. Then he turned and walked out of the aisle. I stayed frozen for what felt like forever, my pulse pounding in my ears. I didn't move until the sound of his footsteps faded. When I finally worked up the courage to peek around the corner, he was gone. I don't know if he left the store entirely or just moved to another section, but I never saw him again. A few minutes later, my mom came back, cheerful and unaware, carrying grocery bags in her hands. She asked if I found anything I wanted, and I shook my head. I didn't tell her what happened. Something inside me knew she wouldn't believe me, Or maybe I was afraid that if I said it out loud, it would make it scarier. But the memory stuck. Even now, years later, I can still picture the way he looked at me. The calm, the intent in his eyes. The way his words cut right into something private. How'd he know I drew? How'd he know it mattered enough to say something about it? Part of me wants to believe he was just guessing. Maybe he said that kind of thing to kids all the time, hoping to sound wise or mystical. But another part of me knows better. There was no reason for him to say what he did. No way he should have known. And that's what unsettles me most. It wasn't just that a stranger spoke to me. It was that he spoke as if he already knew me, as if my private world wasn't mine at all. In that brightly lit Dollar Tree, surrounded by rows of cheap plastic toys and poorly painted figurines, I realized how quickly the ordinary can shift into something unforgettable, something that never really leaves you.